Hey, what is going on, everybody? We have another episode of the GridIron Rundown Podcast. It was a wild weekend of football this past weekend, both Saturday and Sunday, especially Sunday. But here in this podcast episode, we're going to be covering the college football slate on Saturday. Lots of controversy among the officiating of the games this past weekend. We'll cover that, especially with the Auburn and Oklahoma game, which is what a lot of people are talking about. But a couple of other games as well. A lot of storylines are starting to develop and becoming more entrenched as we get further along into the college football season. But before we get started, if you guys could go down, hit the subscribe button, follow. If you're watching on Apple and Spotify, make sure to go check out our YouTube channel or one of our other social medias like TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook, so you can get access to our shorter formed content as well. We'll have that live reactions to games as they're happening. I'm currently recording this during halftime of the Monday Night Football game between the Ravens and Lions. I believe it's 14-14. The Lions just attempted almost a 70-yard field goal and came very close to hitting it as time expired in the first half. But with that being said, let's get into college football. I guess we'll start with the Oklahoma Auburn game. Now, as an Oklahoma fan, obviously very excited to see Oklahoma win. As Oklahoma set the school record with 10 sacks, I believe. I don't think they got to 11. I believe it was just 10. But irregardless, incredible effort, especially considering how R. Mason Thomas wasn't in there for the first half. I want to say they had 6 or 7 in the first half. And that was without R. Mason Thomas. And then his, I think, second or third play back in the second half, he gets a sack. Incredible performance from that Oklahoma defensive line. Definitely one for the ages. But that's not what a lot of people are going to be talking about. They're going to be talking about the officiating of the game. And it started early. Isaiah Satania, who was involved in a lot of different controversial plays in this game. But we'll start with the first one, which was the, was it a fumble? Was it not a fumble? Was it a catch? Was it not a catch? The ESPN rules analyst said it wasn't a catch. I think it was close. To be honest with you, because it was initially ruled as a fumble, I didn't think they would have had the evidence to overturn it. Obviously, just my own biases as an Oklahoma fan, I'm glad it wasn't, or glad it was overturned. I'm glad it wasn't a catch. But I understand the frustrations on that one if you're an Auburn fan or just a casual football observer. Definitely controversial, but in my honest opinion, taking personal biases out of it, because it was initially called a fumble, I think that's very difficult to overturn. If it had been called an incomplete pass, I would be saying the same thing. But it is what it is, and you can't let one play define you. Also, the trick play touchdown to Satania as well. Again, he was involved in a lot of different things in this game. The trick play where he acted like he was going to sub out. Apparently, from what I've been hearing, is that like you can only go to the basically the numbers on the sideline. Once you cross the numbers, you have to come out or check yourself back in. Satania, I guess, went too far, but in my opinion, he lined up and he got the okay from the referee there that he was lined up correctly. Everything was good to go. Regardless of whether that's in the rule book or not, regardless of whether that referee makes a mistake, I don't know what you want to do about that call. Like, worst case scenario, that should have just been a play that was blown dead by the official or replay, because there was nothing being said about Oklahoma. The fake substitution, obviously the penalty wasn't called, but also the referee didn't say a word to him about it. And I guarantee you he was not the only referee on the field that noticed Isaiah Satania was still on the field and lined up. Any one of them could have blown the play dead. Any one of them could have done that. So I think worst case scenario, you'd be looking at like a redo, especially since the one official said he was lined up okay. Oklahoma would have a very valid argument for that. But Auburn knew what was going on. At least their coaches on the sideline did. Now, if I'm an Auburn fan or if I'm just a casual observer, I'm going to remove my own biases here as an Oklahoma fan. Auburn should have got the timeout. They were calling for the timeout. I don't know what happened, why they didn't grant them the timeout. That's what I would be more upset about. I wouldn't be as upset about the fact that the play was allowed to happen. I would be upset about two things. One, that the timeout wasn't called. And two, that your secondary was too busy arguing with Deion Burks as they were trash talking each other to notice Isaiah Satania was still lined up on the side. That's what I would be more upset about. And how about the fact that, I get Hugh Freeze trying to call the timeout. Not, totally get it. As obviously I'm not a head coach, but as someone who's watched enough football throughout the years, that's a totally respectable timeout call right there. Call the timeout, get your defense set, don't give up a free touchdown. However, Hugh Freeze is not the only person on that sideline. Why was no one else yelling at the defense that Satania's over there? If there were, I didn't see it. Mainly, I saw them trying to call the timeout on the sideline. I get it, Hugh Freeze, you call it. Someone else has got to be communicating to the sideline or to the defense from the sideline that Satania's over there. There was the catch by Satania. That one to me was of all the controversial things that are being talked about. The catch by Satania was, in my opinion, without a doubt, a catch. And even if you want to say, well, it was close, it was definitely the least egregious of all the calls, the Isaiah Satania catch. There was also the pass interference on a Cam Coleman, where basically the referee, the back judge, is trying to run away from Cam Coleman because, and honestly, that was on Jackson Arnold. If you want to be upset about anything, be upset at Jackson Arnold, who made that. No, it was a double pass. Sorry, it was a double pass. The receiver that threw that ball. I guess it was a receiver. It might have been a running back. Honestly, I don't. But the pass, he kind of let it too far inside. Coleman had to adjust, cut inside. The referee didn't expect it to happen, so then the referee has to turn around and run. Although there were plenty of other referees on the field that should have been able to make that call. That was clear and obviously a pass interference. The referees were bad. There were a lot of missed calls on Oklahoma's side too. But at the end of the day, I get why Auburn would be frustrated. If I was an Oklahoma fan, I would be frustrated too. But I also would be frustrated that my offensive line allowed 10 sacks. Allowed Oklahoma, who's a storied powerhouse program, who I get it, Lincoln Riley days. Take out the Lincoln Riley days, Oklahoma has historically been a good defense. They've never had 10 sacks. Oklahoma has played in the Big 12 with not the best offensive line, with passes nonstop. Think about how many pass attempts they've played. Think about how many cupcake games they've had. Everybody has cupcake games. Never had 10 plus sacks. They got them on you. And granted, a lot of that was on Jackson Arnold too, but that's why you lost. Jackson Arnold did not perform well under the pressure. Yes, he had a couple of big plays. He also missed a bunch of big plays. He should have had at least 2, if not 3 interceptions, and those are ones that should have been, that if he threw that pass 9 or 10 more times, those would have been interceptions. So I get why Auburn is frustrated. They didn't play well enough to win the game, in my opinion. Oklahoma did. Now, Oklahoma didn't play great offensively. They did not. They didn't execute as well as they should have. Mateer looked a little off. I don't know what's going on. The good thing for Oklahoma is they have a bye week where they can, they've got tape on themselves now against competition in Michigan and Auburn, although similar game plans they had, but nonetheless, you've got tape, you get a bye week, you get to go into Kent State, which might as well be another bye week, and then you get Texas. Oklahoma has plenty of time to work out some of their kinks and, number one, get healthy. Now, for the most part, Oklahoma's not majorly injured, but they just have a lot of nagging injuries, especially on the offensive line. They have injuries rolling over from spring training and training camp as well, guys that are expected to be back. I'm expecting Oklahoma to come out with their hair on fire against Texas. It'll be interesting to see how they play against Kent State, though. For Auburn, they got a big matchup on the road against Texas A&M. You lose this one, you get a bye week, and then you get Georgia. Auburn cannot afford to start the season 3-3. Auburn has to get a win here. If Auburn doesn't get a win against Texas A&M, they will lose to Georgia, and things will spiral out of control. That's just the way Hugh Freeze's programs are. So far in his career, that's how Jackson Arnold has been. Things snowball on him. When one thing goes wrong, a million things go wrong. And just historically, the Auburn program too, they really need a win against Texas A&M, which they certainly are capable of doing. A lot of people are going to write them off. I think it's just going to come down to how does the team respond? Is there going to be a lot of finger pointing and saying, oh, the refs are the only reason we lost the game? Or are they going to say, yeah, we had calls not go our way, but we also should have thrown 3 more interceptions. We also got lucky on some calls. I don't know. We also won a lot of one-on-one jump balls, which I get it. Cam Coleman's very, very good at that. Even the best players in the history of that, it's not a given. They got relatively lucky on that. Speaking of Oklahoma, Brent Venables, I'm sorry. Can we stop single covering Cam Coleman? Can we stop? And I don't know what this basically cover 1 or cover 0 defense shell the entire game, like we saw against Michigan and we saw against Auburn. We're basically daring the quarterback to throw. And I get it. Bryce Underwood, you didn't expect him to throw a lot. Jackson Arnold, you don't respect his ability to throw. I get it. But after Jackson Arnold did that a couple of times, we should have backed off and we should have gave him more help over the top. I don't know the game plan. Maybe it was the corner. Maybe there was some kind of mess up, but got to be better at that. We've got to do a better job of reacting and limiting those passes. And hopefully, maybe it was just those 2 games alone that Brent said we don't respect their pass attack. Maybe that's true. Hopefully it is because, while Auburn might have the best jump ball receiver in the SEC and maybe even the country, right up there with Jeremiah Smith and Cam Coleman, other teams aren't horrible at it. They're going to continue to do that. We'll see. I have confidence in Brent Venables. Hopefully this Oklahoma offense can get back on track. But they don't need to be great. As long as the defense can eliminate the big plays, which has kind of been their Achilles heel, down in and down out, they've been arguably the best defense in the country. It's just 3, 4, 5 plays a game. They give up big plays. We saw it against Michigan and we saw it against Auburn. Got to clean those areas up. Elsewhere, the other big storyline game, there was a bunch of them. Obviously, we'll get into them, but in my opinion, the next biggest game was the Syracuse and Clemson game. Clemson lost at home to Syracuse. Syracuse team who was just depleted in the transfer portal this past offseason. Not to mention they got absolutely boat raced by Tennessee in week 1, which Tennessee's a great team, but we thought Clemson was, a top 5, top 3, maybe even the best team in the country. And they get dominated by Syracuse, although that was very easy to see coming. They looked awful against LSU. They looked even worse against Troy. They lost to Georgia Tech, and now they've lost to Syracuse. And their only win of the year was to a Troy team where they arguably should have lost that one. It's incredible, especially given the speech that Dabo gave about how, they deserve to be treated differently and how they win games and other teams don't and blah, 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 blah. Man, that's a bad look for Clemson. It's a bad look for Dabo. I don't know what Dabo's buyout situation is. I'll look into that. Now, personally speaking, if just take Dabo out, if this was any other program, any other coach, hell, it could be a good team, right? And, just a different coach. But because it's Dabo, because of his popularity, because of his controversial takes on the transfer portal and the NIL era of college football and the controversial things he says in press conferences and on the phone call from last year. You add all of that into it, it's just a bad look, and I don't expect Clemson to put up with it for much longer. Even though, again, different scenario, a different team or a different coach, in literally the exact same scenario, I don't think you give up on the coach. If you take away Dabo's off the field persona and his antics on press conferences and call and his takes on the transfer portal, all that stuff, given Dabo's previous record and the way he's handled things at Clemson and kind of turned the program around, you give him 1 year to be bad. But because of every other circumstance that's going on, I don't know how Clemson does it, unless they just don't have the money. Again, I don't know what his buyout is off the top of my head. We'll have to see how that goes. But man, things are rough for Dabo. It's disappointing because based on projections. Now again, it's projections, so we all know how that goes. Projections are hit or miss. Obviously, that's why they're projections. But I mean, Clemson was projected to have like at least 3 or 4 first-round picks and probably like 9 or 10 drafted guys, especially on that defensive front, their quarterback, their receivers, and nobody's really impressed that much. Definitely not enough to win, which really begs the question about LSU. Like, how good is LSU? They struggled against Clemson. They didn't look amazing against Florida. And if DJ Lagway doesn't throw 5 picks, we're probably feeling a lot different about that, especially given how Florida looked in their other games this year. It's they got beat by South Florida. They got obviously beat by LSU, and then they get beat by Miami. Now Miami offensively didn't look as amazing as I thought they were going to against Florida's defense. Credit their defense, but Florida did nothing. So I don't know. We'll find out how good LSU is. Their schedule is going to start getting tougher. But the win against Florida and Clemson's looking worse and worse day by day. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Florida State and Miami, it appears to be a lock that one of those two are going to win the ACC. My money right now will be on Florida State. I don't know. They've looked like, I still think it's close. I would have told you it was a toss-up, prior to this weekend. Now, instead of it probably being 50-50 Florida State, Miami, I'm probably like 60-40 Florida State on coming out of the ACC. But that'll be interesting to see. And that's going to be a great matchup between Florida State and Miami. I don't think it's this weekend. I think it's next weekend. I think 2 weeks from now. I guess a week and a half now. I'm recording this Monday night. Or, well, a little under 2 weeks, I should say. That'll be interesting to see. Big 12, huge Big 12 implication game. Early morning game, which I guess could be an argument to why it happened, although there's no excuse for what happened. Texas Tech absolutely dominated Utah. And not only did they absolutely dominate Utah, they humiliated Utah offensively. I mean, Utah looked awful. It looked like the Utah of the past couple of years. Although, we've been hearing and honestly been seeing against lesser competition, albeit, but it's like, oh man, Utah finally has an offense. Utah finally has a quarterback. And then they play a team with a pulse and they look like garbage. They couldn't move the ball. It looked like Iowa. It looked like, West Iowa, Iowa West, whatever you want to call it. They looked bad. Now, granted, Texas Tech is a very good team, and their defensive line is very good, and their defensive line dominant. That quarterback looked overwhelmed. Looked like he was, the moment was too big for him. He was missing passes left and right. I don't know how many fumbles Utah had, but it was an insane amount of fumbles. Texas Tech looks like the real deal, and to be honest with you, much like the Ole Miss situation, which we'll, touch on here in a second, but their starter goes out with an injury, and the offense looks even better with the backup in. Another quarterback controversy. Because at this point in the Big 12, you look at it, Kansas State has been a major disappointment this year. They looked horrible against Iowa State, but you could say, well, it's first week of the season, it's week 0, not only that, but it's also in another country, weird time slot, everything like that. I think it was raining in that game, if I remember correctly, too. Maybe not, but regardless, lots of weird things going on. So, you could make excuses for that. And then, they lose to Army. Kansas State has not looked good. Iowa State has been very inconsistent. Although that's kind of the trademark for Matt Campbell teams. And then they get in the big game and they, start exploding for points. I don't know how. Iowa State's kind of always a team that plays up to their competition. That's kind of the Big 12 standard, though. The Big 12 would look like hot garbage, and then they'd play Texas or Oklahoma, and it would look like their hair was on fire every time they played. So I don't know. We'll see how that ends up playing out. But Iowa State's too inconsistent for me. Kansas State's been a major disappointment. Avery Johnson in general for Kansas State's been a disappointment. Um, Kansas lost to Missouri. Missouri's off to a hot start, but I'm not as high on them. Missouri just always feels like early season fool's gold to me, and then they play a really, really good team and they get smacked down. And until they prove otherwise, that's just who they are to me. So Kansas, I'm not as high on. Obviously Utah got boat raced by Texas Tech. You look at Arizona State, who lost to Mississippi State. And I know Mississippi State is much better than they were last year. They are improved and they have looked good, but let's be honest, it's Mississippi State. So I'm not as high on Arizona State. I would probably tie Arizona State and Iowa State at second and third, 2A, 2B, but Texas Tech is by far the clear and away front runner for me in the Big 12. I think Baylor, though, is a team to watch. I know they lost the opener to Auburn, but their quarterback, Sawyer Robertson, is very, very good. But yeah, it looks like it's Texas Tech's conference to lose. And given the reported amount of money they were throwing around, it should be. Elsewhere, speaking of big, impactful games, we had the Illinois-Indiana game. Kurt Cignetti and the Indiana team, man, they absolutely dominated Illinois. Dominated. I mean, I don't. I mean, I don't have words for it. I'm not ready to say Indiana is an elite team, like a true legit national championship contender. Although, based on yesterday and based on what we've seen this season, they are 100%. I'm just not ready to say that for sure. I do want to see them play a better team because I don't know how good Illinois actually. I'm sorry, I don't. You beat a Duke team, Illinois. Congratulations, you beat Duke at football, not basketball, or lacrosse or any other sport that Duke has been good at in the years. But you beat them at football. Me, I'm not that impressed. Duke hasn't really looked all that great this year anyway, in my opinion, anyways. From what I've seen of them, they haven't really looked all that great. So you beating Duke that bad doesn't impress me. Obviously, you get humiliated by Indiana. So how great of a win is that for Indiana? I mean, it's a great win, but how much do we take from it? Do we catapult them into the top 5? In terms of teams with the chance to win the championship, I'm not there. I need to see it against a team that we know for sure is good. A Penn State, an Oregon, Ohio State, something like that. I need to see that. But we'll get our chance. Indiana has their chance. Kurt Cignetti has a chance to, say it with his chest. Maybe he can prove people wrong. Although their quarterback, Mendoza, the transfer from Cal, he does look like the real deal. So I'm sure they'll go just as far as he will take them. And right now they're in a great position. Indiana, you could argue Indiana has the most impressive win of the season. Now, again, I'm not that high on Illinois, but I mean, look, Illinois was ranked, 8? They beat the number 8 team in the country by what was it, 50 points? Was it 63-10 or something like that? I mean, how many teams can say that? Ohio State beat Texas. It was 14-7. And Texas looked awful immediately after that. I don't think that was it was still a good win, but it wasn't that impressive now that we look at it. LSU beat Clemson. Looked impressive. Now it doesn't look impressive. Right? Miami beat Notre Dame. That was an impressive start to the season. Then Notre Dame lost to Texas A&M, and it's well, how good is Notre Dame? So we'll see, but right now, you could argue that's the most impressive win of the season. Speaking of an impressive win, Michigan took down Nebraska without their head coach, their final game without him. I believe that was the 2 games he set out. Bryce Underwood looks a lot better. The offense looks a lot better. A lot of people are talking about, is it because Sharon Moore's not there? I don't know. Although it does definitely feel like they're trusting Bryce Underwood more after the Oklahoma game. Gotta wonder if you're a Michigan fan, that's probably going to stick in your mind all season. That if they had just opened things up for Bryce, could they have won that Oklahoma game? Probably not, but maybe. We'll never know. Um, Nebraska, Matt Rule, Dylan Raiola, couldn't get it done. No excuse as far as I'm concerned. Nebraska, you were on paper the more talented team, especially offensively. Given Bryce Underwood's question mark as a freshman who was a 17-year-old like a month and a half ago. You're the experienced team. Coach has been there for 3 years. Your quarterback has been there for 2 years now, I believe. You're at home. That should have been a win for Nebraska. No excuses. Turns out Nebraska's not back. The Matt Rule year 3 thing, turns out it might not be a thing here in Nebraska. I don't know. Their season's not over yet. Plenty ahead of them. Michigan just may be better than we thought. That very well could be possible. I mean, a lot of people were high on Michigan, not as a national championship contender, but as a 9-10 win team. And then they saw the Oklahoma game, and I think a lot of people just didn't want to give credit to Oklahoma, maybe, and then they just wrote Michigan off as a terrible team. And I don't know. Michigan's looking like a much better team here as we go, and as they allow Bryce Underwood to have more control of the offense. Texas bounced back, had a huge win. I believe it was 55-0. Arch looked a lot better. I mean, although that's expected at their opponent. Look who they're playing. They do have Florida coming up. Now, obviously, offensively, Florida's going to want nothing to do with that Texas defense. That Texas defense should win them the game against Florida alone. But Florida's defense has played very well this year. So I think the thing to look for, number one, is Florida just going to quit? Are they just done with Billy Napier? Is the team just going to quit? Because if they do, then Texas could beat them by 50. Again, I don't remember what the exact score was, but it might as well be 50. But if for whatever reason Florida does not quit and they actually come out and show fight in that game against Texas, again, I don't think Texas is losing that game. Their defense should be able to win the game. Now, Florida's still talented enough to win that game, but they have shown no sign of fully, executing to their full potential this year. So, but I'm not banking on it. I'm just saying, like, Florida's defense could give Texas problems. Arch had the big bounce back this week against, again, a much inferior opponent. Who cares? But that could be a building block game for Arch. And then if he gets it going against Florida, if Florida quit. But I'm just here to tell you, if Florida doesn't quit, unless Arch Manning was actually injured and he's now healthy and is fine, if that's not the case and Arch truly was struggling, which I'm going to believe because there's no reports of his actual injury, so I'm taking he was just bad on his own volition. Florida's defense could cause Texas problems. Again, not that I'm projecting them to lose, but cause confidence problems heading into the Red River shootout with Oklahoma. And you got confidence problems heading up against the Brent Venables defense, especially in that game. Things could unravel fast for Texas. So that's going to be key to watch. The Florida-Texas game when it comes up. As Florida quit on their team after Florida just got humiliated offensively. They couldn't do anything in the game. I believe they had only like 100 and some yards of offense. It was the fewest amount of yards they've had in the Billy Napier era, which is saying a lot because Florida's had some putrid offensive performances. Speaking of Texas, like the Texas game last year. So we'll see how that goes. Lots of big games on the slate this coming weekend. Obviously headlines Alabama and Georgia, the big one. We'll see how it goes. But overall, it's a great weekend of college football. Auburn fans, I get why you're upset. Don't come at me. Don't let your quarterback get sacked 10 times. I don't know what to tell you. Indiana, are they for real? I don't know. They've proven nothing to believe otherwise. They have the most impressive win of the season so far. Originally earlier I had said Oregon was the best team in the country to me. That's how they've looked. Um, Not so much anymore. Um, then I was kind of leaning towards Miami. Then Miami defensively played really well against Florida. Offensively, it was kind of hit or miss. Honestly, there's just so much parity right now in college football. You could say Georgia too, beating Tennessee, but Georgia should have lost that game in my opinion. So I couldn't tell you who the best team in college football is right now. I think it's a jumbled mess of Georgia and Tennessee and Oklahoma and OSU and Alabama out of the SEC. I think you got Florida State and Miami. You can throw Texas in there as well, Ohio State, Penn State. You can throw Oregon in there, despite the fact that I think their run defense is going to kill them. And based on this past weekend, I think you got to throw Texas Tech and Indiana in there as well for the teams that look the best so far to start this year. It'll be interesting to see. Missouri did get a big win this week against South Carolina, although South Carolina's looks pretty bad this year. But, this was the best South Carolina had looked. So I guess Missouri could argue that maybe South Carolina's turning a corner, but you also could argue that Missouri made South Carolina look that good when no one else was able to do that. Everyone else shut them down or made them look, very pedestrian like Virginia Tech did, or shut them out like Vanderbilt did. So a lot of interesting storylines. It'll continue to play as we start to ramp up conference play. One team I do want to keep an eye on, though, is USC. As an Oklahoma fan, I want to see Lincoln Riley crash and burn more than anyone, but USC quietly is looking pretty good. Their defense is still not great, but I do think their defense is better than it has been since Lincoln Riley's been there. And think you could argue that the best quarterback they've had with Lincoln at USC outside of the Caleb Heisman year. Caleb's second year there, and then last year was not great. Maeva has all these weapons, which is one thing Caleb didn't have. So you actually could argue that the offense, better than it was even in Caleb's Heisman year. So lots of interesting things taking place here in college football. Conference play there's already been a ton of conference games played, but it's really going to start ramping up here over the next couple of weeks. So I'm interested to see how things play out. Y'all let me know your opinions of this past weekend, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.